Aging is often seen through the lens of decline, isolation, and limitations. But what if the later years of life could be a time for growth, adventure, and meaningful connections instead? In this video, we'll explore the inspiring stories of three remarkable individuals, Grandpa Joe, Mrs. Hargrove, and Mr. Thompson, who are redefining what it means to age. These stories go beyond the conventional path of nursing homes or assisted living. They show how small changes, support, and a fresh perspective can turn the later years into the most vibrant and fulfilling chapter of life. Aging is not an end, but a new beginning, an opportunity to embrace discovery, creativity, and joy in the present moment. Let's dive into their inspiring journeys. Grandpa Joe, the independent spirit meet. Grandpa Joe, an extraordinary 85-year-old whose zest for life is a testament to the enduring power of independence. For as long as anyone can remember, Joe has been the epitome of self-sufficiency. An early riser, Joe greets the dawn with a brisk morning walk, his weathered face lit by the soft glow of sunrise. His neighborhood, a mix of cozy homes and tree-lined streets, has always been his sanctuary, where he exchanged smiles and greetings with neighbors he had known for decades. For Joe, every morning walk wasn't just about exercise, it was about connecting with his community, feeling grounded in a space that had seen the milestones of his life. Joe's love for gardening is another cornerstone of his daily routine. His hands, now aged and marked with the years of hard work, gently coax life from the soil in his backyard garden. Each plant, each flower, is a reflection of his years of care, patience, and nurturing. His garden is more than a hobby. It's a living testament to his life's work, an enduring symbol of his ability to cultivate beauty and life, no matter his age. For Joe, routine and independence have always been sacred. But as the years passed, his family began to notice subtle changes. His steps, once quick and purposeful, became slower, more measured. His garden visits, once hours long, were shortened, and his energy seemed to wane as the weight of time began to take its toll. It was then that conversations about assisted living and nursing homes began to surface. His family worried that Joe could no longer safely maintain his lifestyle. They feared for his well-being, concerned that his increasing frailty might put him at risk. Mrs. Hargrove, a journey of self-discovery. The story of Mrs. Hargrove, a retired teacher in her 70s, offers another inspiring look at how life after retirement can be an opportunity for self-discovery and reinvention. After decades of shaping young minds in the classroom, Mrs. Hargrove found herself at a crossroads. She had devoted much of her life to others, and now she faced a question that many retirees must eventually ask themselves: what comes next? She didn't want to follow the conventional path that many of her peers took, moving into a nursing home or staying in a familiar, albeit increasingly monotonous, routine. Mrs. Hargrove felt that her life still had more to offer, and she yearned for a change. So in a bold move, she made a decision that would dramatically alter the course of her life. Mrs. Hargrove chose to leave her longtime home and move to a small, lively community specifically designed for retirees. This wasn't an easy decision. Mrs. Hargrove's family, though supportive, were understandably concerned. They feared that she might be leaving behind the comfort of her familiar surroundings for something uncertain. They couldn't quite understand why she would make such a drastic change at her age. But Mrs. Hargrove felt a deep, undeniable pull toward something new, a place where she could rediscover her passions, form new connections, and infuse her days with joy and purpose once again. The first few weeks in her new community were, as expected, challenging. She had to navigate unfamiliar social dynamics, introduce herself to strangers, and adjust to the rhythms of a new environment. But slowly, over time, something extraordinary happened. Mrs. Hargrove began to flourish. She found herself surrounded by a group of like-minded individuals, each with their own stories and passions. They shared common interests, from literature to gardening to community events. And soon, they became more than just acquaintances. They became her new circle of friends, her support system, her extended family. In the months that followed, Mrs. Hargrove rediscovered a long-lost passion that had been relegated to the sidelines during her busy teaching career: knitting. What had once been a hobby she barely had time for was now a source of immense joy and fulfillment. She began teaching knitting classes to other residents, finding not only a creative outlet but also a deep sense of purpose. As she guided her fellow retirees through the intricacies of knitting, her eyes sparkled with excitement and pride. It was clear that she was not simply passing the time. She was contributing, connecting, and creating in a way that ignited her spirit. Mr. Thompson, the adventurer at 92. The story of Mr. Thompson, a 92-year-old man who has chosen a life of adventure rather than retreat, is a stunning testament to the fact that it's never too late to live fully. Unlike many people his age, who might choose the comfort of routine and familiar surroundings, Mr. Thompson made the bold decision to transform his golden years into a vibrant, globe-trotting adventure. With his daughter by his side as a traveling companion, he embraced his 90s not as a time to slow down, but as an opportunity to live out the dreams he had once put on hold. Mr. Thompson's travels are not the typical adventures of a man checking off a list of destinations. He's not interested in luxury cruises or guided tours designed for tourists. Instead, Mr. Thompson seeks authenticity in every corner of the world. Imagine him wandering the charming streets of Paris, where he delights in the aroma of freshly baked bread and the laughter of locals sipping coffee in sidewalk cafes. Picture him hiking through the rolling hills of the Italian countryside, taking in the vast expanses of vineyards and olive groves, or perhaps standing amidst the ancient ruins of Greece, marveling at the civilizations that once shaped the world. What sets Mr. Thompson's travels apart from most is his desire to immerse himself in the local cultures. He stays in modest apartments and boutique hotels, mingles with locals in bustling markets, and dines at small eateries where the true flavors of the region come to life. His journeys are not about collecting souvenirs. They are about collecting experiences that nourish his soul and enrich his understanding of the world. A lifelong passion for gardening. Gardening had always been Mr. Clark's sanctuary. For as long as he could remember, his hands had been in the soil, coaxing life from the earth and cultivating a space that was not just a garden, but a reflection of his soul. His garden was his masterpiece, a living, breathing testament to decades of hard work, patience, and love. It was not merely a plot of land filled with flowers and vegetables. It was a sacred space that he had poured his heart into, each plant a marker of a moment in time, a memory of his journey. The morning sun would find Mr. Clark kneeling on the soft soil, his hands moving with the rhythmic precision of someone who had spent a lifetime tending to this patch of earth. Each task, whether it was planting seeds, pruning branches, or simply watering his flowers, brought him a sense of fulfillment that no other activity could match. The scent of the flowers, the rustling of the leaves in the wind, the sight of a fresh bloom, it was his form of meditation, a way to connect with nature and with himself. His garden was expansive, large vegetable plots that fed his family, vibrant flowers that brightened his home, and towering trees that offered shade and shelter. Over the years, it had grown and evolved with him, a shared history between man and land. It was where he found solace, peace, and a profound sense of accomplishment. There was no greater joy for Mr. Clark than to stand in his garden in the early evening, watching the fruits of his labor take shape, whether it was a ripe tomato or a wildflower dancing in the breeze. The unseen struggles of growing older. However, like all things in life, time was beginning to catch up with Mr. Clark. The years that had once been filled with the energy and vitality of youth now started to take their toll on his body. What had once been a seamless and effortless routine of tending to his garden had become a series of struggles. The constant bending, kneeling, and lifting were no longer easy. His joints ached, his back stiffened, and what had once been a labor of love now felt like a mountain he had to climb every day. Despite these physical challenges, Mr. Clark's spirit remained undiminished. His love for his garden, the very thing that had defined so much of his life, was as strong as ever. But the reality of aging, its unavoidable physical limitations, began to impose itself on the way he could interact with his cherished garden. Tasks that once brought him a sense of joy now felt like burdens. The sprawling garden, once a testament to his energy and passion, had become an overwhelming responsibility. The family's concerns. It was around this time that Mr. Clark's family began to notice the subtle changes. They saw how his once strong hands now trembled slightly as he pruned the bushes, how the strain of bending over to tend to his vegetable patches left him gasping for breath. They watched with growing concern as the garden that had once been his pride and joy began to take a toll on his health. His children, deeply concerned for his well-being, gently suggested that it might be time to scale back on his gardening efforts or even give up the garden entirely. They argued that the garden was no longer a sustainable pursuit for someone of his age, especially with the physical toll it was clearly taking on his body. They worried that the strenuous labor involved in maintaining such a large garden would put undue strain on his health and possibly lead to serious injury. The notion of him continuing to toil away in the garden, his refuge and sanctuary, seemed to them like an unnecessary risk. After all, wasn't it common for people of his age to hand over responsibilities like these and leave them to the younger generation? Reimagining the garden, adapting to change. Instead of clinging to what was no longer feasible, Mr. Clark made peace with the changes brought about by age. He chose to focus on the things that brought him the most joy and let go of those that demanded too much physical labor. Gone were the large vegetable plots that required constant upkeep. In their place, he planted smaller beds with hardy, low-maintenance vegetables that would nourish his spirit without overwhelming his body. He replaced the towering trees that needed frequent pruning with smaller bushes and perennials that bloomed year after year, requiring minimal attention. One of the most thoughtful adjustments he made was incorporating pots and planters into his new garden design. These could be placed at waist height, allowing Mr. Clark to tend to his plants without bending over or straining his back. This small change made a world of difference, allowing him to continue gardening without the physical discomfort that had previously plagued him. The result of these changes was a garden that was smaller in size, but infinitely more meaningful. It was still his haven, but now it had an intimacy and charm that his previous sprawling garden had lacked. The simplicity of the smaller space allowed him to focus on the joy of each individual plant, the scent of the herbs, the sight of the tomatoes ripening on the vine, the quiet beauty of the flowers in bloom. The renewed joy in simplicity. What had once been a labor-intensive project had transformed into a serene, manageable space that brought Mr. Clark a deep sense of fulfillment. He no longer felt pressured to maintain perfection or to keep up with the demands of a large garden. Instead, he embraced the imperfections and found beauty in the process of gardening itself. Each seed he planted, each new leaf that sprouted, became a symbol of his resilience and his ability to adapt. The act of gardening, now more meditative than laborious, became an opportunity for reflection and connection. As he worked in his garden, Mr. Clark found himself reconnecting with the very essence of why he had loved gardening in the first place. It was not about the size of the garden or the quantity of produce it yielded. It was about the process, the joy of nurturing something from the earth, the peace of being surrounded by nature, and the satisfaction of seeing his work come to life in vibrant colors and scents. A lesson in resilience. Mr. Clark's story is a powerful reminder that aging does not mean the end of our passions. It simply means finding new ways to continue doing what we love, even as our bodies change. The ability to adapt, to reimagine our pursuits in a way that aligns with our new circumstances, is one of life's greatest gifts. Mr. Clark did not allow the challenges of aging to extinguish his love for gardening. Instead, he found a way to continue cultivating his passion in a way that honored both his limitations and his love for the earth. His story teaches us that resilience is not about clinging to what was, but about embracing what can be. Life is not about holding on to the past, but about adapting and reinventing ourselves as we move forward. Mr. Clark's garden, smaller and simpler as it may have become, remained a source of deep joy and fulfillment. It was a living testament to the fact that passion can evolve with age, and that our capacity for joy and growth does not diminish with time. It simply requires us to find new paths to explore. As he stands in his reimagined garden, Mr. Clark is not just surviving, he is thriving. His ability to embrace change, to continue nurturing his soul through gardening, is a lesson for all of us. Aging does not have to mean giving up the things we love. It means finding new ways to cherish and nurture those things, even as our circumstances evolve. In the end, Mr. Clark's garden became a symbol of more than just flowers and vegetables. It became a symbol of resilience, of the enduring power of passion, and of the limitless potential for growth no matter how old we are. A home built on memories. From the moment Mildred and her late husband moved into the house, it became the foundation upon which their shared dreams were built. Their home wasn't just a place to live. It was a place where they created a family, weathered storms, and celebrated countless milestones. They marked each year with memories etched into the walls, birthdays celebrated with cake and laughter, holidays spent surrounded by the warmth of loved ones, and quiet nights spent together in peaceful solitude. The house held the echoes of their love, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes raucous and filled with the chaos of children, but always full of life. It was in this house that Mildred's children took their first steps, spoke their first words, and grew up under the watchful eye of their devoted mother. Each room had witnessed the passing of time, the fleeting moments of childhood, and the inevitable transitions into adulthood. In the kitchen, she could still hear the memories of spilled milk on the scuffed floor as her young children ran around in the early mornings, excited about the day ahead. The kitchen table, where countless family meals were shared, was more than just a place to eat. It was where stories were told and where relationships were strengthened. Even the faded photographs on the mantelpiece were memories in themselves, capturing moments of joy, of triumph, and of deep loss. These images were more than mere pictures. They were windows into a past that was forever anchored in this place. Mildred's home had borne witness to decades of laughter, tears, and love. As she looked around, each corner of the house seemed to tell a story, one that was intricately woven into the fabric of her life. The decision to stay. But as the years passed, Mildred's body began to show the natural signs of aging. Her health started to falter, and her children, concerned for her well-being, gently suggested she consider moving to a nursing home. They felt that this was the safest option for her. After all, the house, though full of memories, had grown harder to maintain. It was an old home, one that required more upkeep than Mildred could manage on her own. The thought of leaving the house was a hard pill to swallow for her children, but they believed it was the most responsible choice. Mildred, however, was adamant that she was not ready to leave. The idea of leaving her home behind, of saying goodbye to the place where she had raised her family, celebrated her milestones, and lived so many rich years, was more than she could bear. How could she walk away from the house that had been the setting of so many precious memories? How could she leave behind the walls that had witnessed the love between her and her husband, who had since passed, or the kitchen table where her children had grown and become the adults they were today? Her home wasn't just a structure, it was the very essence of her life, and the thought of parting with it felt like parting with her soul. To Mildred, the idea of leaving would be akin to erasing a piece of herself. Every time she looked at the photos, the worn armchair, or the kitchen table, she felt connected to the love and joy that had defined her life. To leave the home would be to sever ties with all of that history, something she wasn't willing to do. A new approach to aging in place. Instead of reluctantly accepting the idea of moving, Mildred decided to take matters into her own hands. She wanted to stay in the home she loved, but she knew she needed to adapt to her changing needs. Her solution was not to let go of her cherished memories, but to find new ways to remain connected to them while also ensuring her safety and well-being. Mildred's children, understanding her determination, came together to offer their support. Her daughter started visiting once a week to help with errands and chores that had become too difficult for Mildred to manage on her own. Her grandchildren, always full of youthful energy and affection, would stop by after school to help with grocery shopping or simply spend time with her. Mildred's neighbors, who had become lifelong friends, also rallied around her, offering to check in on her regularly, fix small things around the house, or simply keep her company. This collective support system became the cornerstone of Mildred's ability to stay in her home. Practical adjustments for independence. Mildred, too, took steps to make her home safer and more manageable for her. She had grab bars installed in the bathroom, making it easier for her to maintain her balance. She moved her bedroom to the first floor, eliminating the need to navigate stairs, and she arranged for a cleaning service to help with heavier chores, ensuring that the house stayed tidy and comfortable without overburdening her. These small, practical changes allowed Mildred to maintain a sense of independence and comfort while still being mindful of her physical limitations. It wasn't just about adjusting the physical aspects of her home, though. It was about creating an environment that allowed her to continue living a life full of purpose and connection. Her home once again became a hub of activity, where her family could gather to share stories, play games, and laugh together. The walls, which had already borne witness to a lifetime of memories, continued to hold new moments of joy. It was a place where Mildred could still pass down the stories of her life, stories that would live on in the hearts of her children and grandchildren. Her home, transformed by love and a deep sense of belonging, became more than just a house. It became a legacy. Each object in the house told a story. Each photograph, each piece of furniture, was a symbol of the life Mildred had built and the family she had raised. The home itself was a living, breathing reflection of who she was, a woman who had lived a full, meaningful life, and who was determined to continue to do so on her own terms. A testimony to resilience and love. Mildred's decision to stay in her home was not just practical, it was a deeply emotional choice. She chose not only to preserve her independence, but also to honor the memories and relationships that had shaped her life. It was about holding on to the past while continuing to live fully in the present. For Mildred, her home wasn't just a place, it was a part of her identity, and by staying in it, she was able to preserve a connection to all the love, joy, and even sorrow that had defined her life. Her story serves as a profound reminder that home is more than just a physical space. It is a reflection of who we are and where we have come from. Mildred's journey underscores the importance of adapting to life's challenges while maintaining a sense of continuity and connection. Her home and the memories it held were not just important because of what they represented, but because they allowed her to continue to live with purpose and love. In the end, Mildred's choice to stay in her home, despite the challenges and risks, was not about stubbornness or refusal to change. It was about preserving the essence of who she was and honoring the life she had built. It was about the power of love, family, and memory, and the unyielding spirit of a woman who refused to let go of the place that held her heart. Her story is a beautiful reminder that sometimes the most profound way to age gracefully is to stay connected to the places and people that matter most. It's not about letting go of the past. It's about adapting and continuing to live in a way that reflects our deepest values and connections.